This video is kind of an excuse to talk about one of my favorite games. But more than that, it's a video about showmanship, details, and confidence. This video is about Astro's Playroom. This small game only comes pre-downloaded on every PlayStation 5. So depending on who you ask, Astro's Playroom is either free or $500. I would say it's worth the money either way. Okay, I don't think I would actually spend $500 on this one game, but I do think there is more energy in this game than many other bigger games I've played combined. Let me tell you why. This little game has great showmanship. When you begin your adventure, they put you in a dark room, and the first thing you get to do is leap out of the controller. I think it's important that you start like this. It's like the game telling you that your participation is the catalyst for the adventure. I also really like the ratcheting noise the gears make as you twist the controller here. Other than your little metallic footsteps echoing into the void, the room is quiet. Making your way up the platform, you learn how to jump, and you learn that if you hold the jump button, you can hover in the air for a while. Further up, you also learn that the lasers coming out of your feet can do damage, and you use them to break the glass barriers and press the giant buttons. The game has a little more to teach you, presenting you with a glass dome that you need to smack a bunch of times to shatter, revealing some colorful wires. Now you learn that if you hold the smack button, you can grab, and if you walk backwards, you can pull. These first little interactions are explicitly teaching you how to play the game, but they are also implicitly training you to experiment and to think playfully when interacting with the world you're about to enter. When you satisfyingly pull the wires all the way out, the space bursts open and reveals to you the hub area. Giant mechanisms dramatically rise up from the ground. The music swells. And the camera settles behind your little astrobot, ready to follow your lead. You're free now. The game will not guide you or push you in a direction. They just lay out this strange, inviting place and want you to go where your spirit moves you. If you're like me, you might first investigate those huge contraptions that came out of the floor. And if you're like me, you'll also be surprised and delighted when they transform into a glowing portal to another world. They each do a unique, complex animation, with panels sliding and gears turning, pieces slamming into place. Each door has a beckoning foyer in front of it, and while you're standing in front of the door, playing in the water or the fog like me, you can faintly hear the music of the world beyond the portal, incorporated seamlessly into the music of the hub. This door has a warm look to it, and some grass out front. Let's go in. I chose this world because it's a strong example of the showmanship I'm talking about. Here was my experience of this level. I started walking around, hearing the background music that was pretty catchy, and then I noticed that the music has lyrics, so I stopped walking and listened to it. I'll play a little bit for you. It's a song that is sung from the perspective of a GPU, a graphics processing unit, which is a computer chip present in every video game console. This computer chip is responsible for a lot of the graphics that you see on screen in any game. And this song is about that. It's a love song about a computer chip. That's so unapologetically dorky, I love it. And then I noticed that the giant computer graphics chip off in the distance is the one singing this song. The background music of this level is diegetic, meaning it's occurring within the context of the game. And throughout the level, the singing, dancing GPU is ever present. You can even find the lyrics of the song inscribed into the bedrock of this world. With all these theatrics, something as typically unnoteworthy as background music becomes an event. The game is also theatrical with how you get to different areas. You rarely, if ever, just walk into a new place. You slide into them, or fall into them, or are thrown up into them. These flourishes energize the flow, and show that the developers care about how you enter a space. And that makes me care about it too. There are so many examples of this proud showmanship. But the game doesn't sacrifice convenience. Once you have completed an area, you can hop back into it from anywhere else through a snappy menu. The developers understand that showmanship isn't just about grandeur, it's also about respecting your audience's time. There are so many robust animations, like pulling these massive wires to finish a level. And how about these functional diving boards that give you a reward when you leap off the highest one? Or the ice skating you can do, complete with Olympic flying spins when you jump. With interactions like this, the game presents itself with style and also includes you, letting you play stylishly. But as grand as the game can be, it is in the little things that the developers most thoroughly practice their alchemy, and again, make the typical wonderful. Astro's Playroom doesn't have story cutscenes, or dialogue, or a deep backstory. Instead, the developers use an army of details to build their world. And the game is so classy about it. When you first open the game, before you get control of your character, you are greeted with a short demonstration for the controller you're holding. And this demo is a preview of how detail-oriented these developers are. What could have been a simple two-dimensional image is instead a painstakingly accurate model of the PlayStation 5 controller that perfectly mimics the one in your hand. Every movement, every trigger pull and button press, even the barely visible injection-molded pattern of shapes that make up the textured grips. This pattern is actually on your controller, so small that I imagine some people don't even notice them. The different plastic and rubber materials reflect the light in their own accurate way. The charging and audio ports are there, and so is some of the legal print on the back. There is something odd about holding an object and seeing its exact replica on the screen responding to your movements. It tricks my brain and makes the controller on screen feel more grounded and weighty, while also making the controller in my hand feel more fanciful. The game hasn't even started in earnest, but they are still treating this introduction with an attention and a thoughtfulness that endeared me. This little controller demo serves as an introduction to the game, but also kind of as an introduction to video games in general, playfully teaching you how to use a controller and not assuming the experience level of the player, for whom playing video games might be completely new. And because of this, they made it feel new again to me too. It's like the game is saying, hey, aren't video game controllers neat? Isn't it cool that when you press a button on the controller, something happens on the screen? Yes, it is cool, Astro's Playroom. Thank you for reminding me not to take for granted one of the most basic pleasures of this art form. When I look at a circuit board, my mind lights up. All those mysterious little electrical components arranged in a way I don't understand. It always looked like a tiny city to me. Those lines look like roads, and those cylinders look like power plants, and ooh, that building looks important. I wonder what goes on in there. I've looked at them this way since I was a kid, imagining myself shrunk down exploring this strange place. And Astro's Playroom captures some of that circuit board aesthetic that I've always wanted. On a related note, there used to be a store called Circuit City. It was a tech shop, a competitor to Best Buy and Radio Shack. And I remember thinking as a child, oh man, I bet it's so cool in there. Circuit City? Only to be immensely disappointed when I walked in and found out it's just a store with shelves and adults. Astro's Playroom is kind of what I was imagining Circuit City was like. So much of the visuals give me that wondrous feeling of walking through a tiny circuit world made huge. Like these tree trunks that are a bundle of wires and the little zip tie that holds them together. And even the zip tie has a circuit pattern on it. And the leaves of the trees have their own circuits, and they have such a brilliant metallic finish. I think my favorite variation of this is the rose gold. And look at this grass. They could have just made regular looking grass, but no. When you look close, you can see each blade is like a ribbon cable, and there are multiple variations of these too. And the flowers, each petal is its own little electrical component. The world expresses this circuit board aesthetic in countless ways, and I felt kindred with the developers. Like maybe they too looked at circuit boards as children with the same wonder I do, and thankfully grew up and became talented enough to make this game. The world also has this visual motif of the PlayStation button icons. The green triangle, red circle, blue X, and pink square. And I am so impressed with how many places they have found to put these symbols. There are symboled flowers of different kinds, and they sparkle when you run through them. In some places, the walls are embossed with the symbols. If you look closely, you'll even notice the raindrops fall and ripple into these symbols. Also, I love that Astro has a little automatic umbrella. Whether you notice them or not, the details are there. And the more you look for them, the more you'll find. Importantly, the details are not just visual. There are many playful ways to interact with the world if you care to explore and experiment. When you jump into water, an adorable little floaty deploys automatically. Jump onto a surfboard and Astro will strike a pose. These neatly stacked pool noodle things have physics on them and are so fun to kick around. Start pushing a snowball and it'll keep growing. Punch an igloo and it will fall down brick by brick. The robot animals react to you as well, like this dolphin who will give you a short ride, or this little crab on the beach who has a broom and dustpan for claws. Nothing is taken for granted, even the camera movement. Look around and Astro will give you a little wave. The sound design also deserves a lot of credit for how much tactility it adds to everything. And the entire soundtrack is excellent. All the songs fit the fantastical techno style of the world so well. And I won't even go into much detail about how almost every single little robot in this world is doing something unique, and many of them react to you and can be interrupted in their own clumsy way. There are hundreds of these little bots all around, and many of them are loving references to other video games, like God of War, Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima, Bloodborne. The list goes on and on. The developers obviously want you to engage with the world, and they make everything colorful and cute and lively enough that I was happy to engage. and even happier when so many of my silly actions had silly consequences. Let's talk about this game's confidence. This game cares so much about its presentation and its details. But it also doesn't care at all. It doesn't care which order you play the levels in. It doesn't care if you recognize its references. It doesn't care if you want to find all the secrets. The developers ensure that you'll get more out of the game the more you give it. But how much you want to give is your business. There are places in the game that do demand more of you than you might expect, though. Astro can only take one hit, and many enemies take multiple steps to defeat. Some of the platforming also requires a level of performance that I didn't expect. None of it is brutally difficult, but it is at times just tough enough to remind you not to fall asleep at the wheel. The exploration is refreshingly hands-off. It's rare that they explicitly tell you where to go, and when they do, it's through visual flourishes that fit stylistically into the level. You're free to explore as much or as little as you like. There's no desperate plea from the game, asking you to find its many secrets and features. There are a bunch of these short challenge levels that you can play, and while aesthetically similar to the main levels, these are new levels with new stuff in them. They're fun. And I did not realize they existed until I was done with the game. The portal to get to these levels, which is adorably modeled like an Ethernet port, is at the far end of the hub, and you have to go and investigate this wall to realize that it's another portal. And somehow I just never thought to walk over here. So many other games would have been notifying me about these extra levels and bothering me about them and pushing me to go do them. But Astro's Playroom does not care. Play them, don't play them, they're there for you if you find them and want them, but the rest is up to you. I also appreciate how clean the technical presentation is. There's no heads-up display cluttering the screen, or lens flares on the camera, and the view distances are long and clear. Sometimes games will use certain effects like vignetting or motion blur or chromatic aberration to hide some of the imperfections in their graphics. But Astro's Playroom keeps a high image clarity and doesn't shy away from its textures and geometry. Because of this, the game achieves the rare goal of making my display feel more like a window than a TV screen. It's a beautiful world with tight gameplay mechanics, a bounty of ideas, and the game knows it. I want to show you one more aspect of this game that perfectly exemplifies the showmanship, detail, and confidence that I've been talking about. Right behind where you start in the hub, there is another portal, this time in the shape of a PlayStation 1. Very cute. Beyond this portal is a huge room that serves as a kind of PlayStation museum. At first, it's empty, but you fill it up by finding what the game lovingly refers to as artifacts. They're pieces of hardware from PlayStation history, like game consoles, handheld devices, controllers, accessories. There are a lot of these items, and I imagine someone with a longer gaming history than me would look at some of these with nostalgic fondness. The showmanship is in how these items are collected and displayed. You can find these items as secrets in the levels. You also receive the main consoles as a reward for finishing a world. This is done in wonderfully dramatic fashion. And maybe the most fun way of all is the toy machine. With the coins you've been collecting all over the levels, you can pay for a turn on the toy machine and get a capsule. The robotic arm holds the capsule, and you have to pop it open by squeezing the trigger on the controller. And because of the way the motors in the PS5 controller work, there's a resistance in the left trigger as you pull the lever, and a tactile pop in the right trigger as you snap open the capsule. When you collect these artifacts, they are added to the museum, and you can walk around and observe them in a real space. They're organized by console generation, and when you've collected everything, it's an impressive sight, with some being hung from the ceiling, some standing up tall with ladders put against them, and of course the giant PlayStation 5 rotating in the middle of the gallery. To my delight, you can climb up on everything, and even with some difficult platforming, get to those objects up high and look down on your whole collection. The grandeur and reverence of this presentation somehow made me care about objects I have never seen or used before. But I think the details here are what truly make this a museum. Each of these objects is modeled just as thoroughly as the PS5 controller in that opening demo. You can rotate and zoom in on all of them. Most of them have a fun little animation, like flipping the screen or lighting up an LED. Even better, you can see these animations and more by running up to these objects and smacking them. This model of the PlayStation 2, my first ever console, can flip the disc tray lid, turn on from the power button, and also rotate the little PlayStation symbol on the front. You could do this with the actual PS2. These are probably the most accurate 3D renders in existence for most of these devices. And as a result, the respect and detail these models are treated with give this playful museum a very real historical value. But as high effort as this aspect of the game is, these developers are so secure in their work that you literally never need to step into this portal. It's not mandatory, it's barely advertised, and it's entirely possible that you play through this whole game and never engage with it. I can't imagine the confidence it would take to be so laid back about such an impressive pillar of your game. I have only scratched the surface in showcasing the game. If you play Astro's Playroom, I personally encourage you to engage with the museum and the secrets and everything else this game has to offer. But the developers? They don't seem worried about what you do or don't do in their world. I think that's because they know, with the amount of love put into this game, they've made all of it worthwhile. Thanks for watching. If you found this video worthwhile, consider checking out my Patreon, where any tier gets you even more of my thoughts that don't make it into the videos, as well as your name in the credits. Speaking of, thank you to my patrons.